fellas, how in the hell are we doing here today? Now this might seem a little bit random considering this game is, geez, almost 10 years old by now, but today I am finally excited to bring you all a boss tier list for Bloodborne. This right here is easily one of From Software's biggest titles, and I've never been able to play it because it's been gate kept behind Sony for the past decade with no PC port. But your boy finally acquired a PS5, and this was the first thing I immediately downloaded. Before we get into things though, I just want to preface this video a bit. There's no easy way to put this, but we will not be including the dungeons or DLC in this video. This is just a list of every optional and required main game bosses. If that's a problem, just hit the dislike button and head on out, homie. I mean, I am truly sorry. I can already see the comment section lighting on fire as we speak, but this game was so incredibly long and it already almost took me like 30 hours to beat it, and I just don't have any more time to spend on it. I am truly astonished at how much content was in here, but Avowed is already out, and if you're a real member of Bound, you already know that that's one of my most anticipated games to drop, so I just need to start playing that already. The dungeon bosses also don't necessarily scale with your character anyways. Like, the only time I ever checked those out, I went into a boss fight and just started one-shotting these guys. Like, how am I supposed to rate that? I truly am sorry for not getting that stuff. Alright, I know some people might be a little disgruntled about that, but yeah, this is just all 17 of the base story game bosses. If that's all good with you, let's just strap in here and get straight into things with number 17, the easiest boss in Bloodborne, Witch of Hemwick. This fight feels like it could be done straight up in your sleep. The hardest part of the whole thing is just figuring out what's going on, but once you get it, everything is a breeze. In this fight, the witch goes invisible and spawns other random mobs to fight for her, but they're massive pushovers. These guys just kind of slow walk around the arena and swing their sword around, but they're weak as hell and you're able to stun lock them pretty easily. Most of the time you don't even have to deal with them. It's only like later into the fight sometimes you have to kill them to actually deal damage to the witch, but for the most part, you're just running around chasing a ghost that really doesn't do anything. She does have actual attacks like a stun lock. She can smack you around with a stick or explode for magic damage, but she really never throws it out, and I don't know why. Next at number 16, we have the Celestial Emissary. The hardest part about this fight is just trying to tell the plants and the aliens apart. For this boss, you're just fighting an army of little blue aliens trying to find the emissary to do actual damage. Once you find him, you can pretty comfortably wail on him a bit, but once you get to the second phase, he turns into a giant boss that actually does big boy damage. But even still, with his newfound courage, this fight isn't much of an issue. Next at number 15, we have Mikolash, Host of Nightmare. This guy was surprisingly a massive pushover for this late in the game, but I'll take all the free blood echoes I can get. More than half of this fight is you just chasing this guy around a giant library until he settles on this small room to actually fight in. When you're actually in combat with this guy, he only has 3 real attacks he uses. He punches, has tentacles, and explodes magic that does some pretty fat damage, but he doesn't even get that until the second phase. 90% of the time, he's just gonna spam these tentacles at you, but it's really easy to get into the rhythm of dodging those and getting your hits in. Next at number 14, we have Rom, the Vacuous Spider. This fight was really annoying more than anything. This boss spawns in immediately with 10 or so spider minions that huddle around him, and you have to take them out before you can do any real damage to the actual boss. And they all have stone heads that take less damage, so you have to spend extra time with each one to go around their back and actually kill them. This keeps happening throughout the fight too. I think you have to go through 3 different phases of these spider spawns, and it's the biggest headache ever. Rom himself actually isn't anything crazy at all. He pretty much just sits there until the second spawn phase, and then you're just dodging magic attacks or the occasional ground pound. All of these first 3 fights on the list are really just a marathon more than anything. They're not hard at all, but they're incredibly drawn out for no reason, and the longer a fight goes on, the more prone to mistakes you are. Enough of these though, let's keep going. Next at number 13, we have Moon Presence. This fight might be a bit of a surprise being this low since it's one of the final fights in the game, but being this late in the game, he is really not hard at all. This fight is pretty much the same as 90% of the other big mob fights we have. He's gonna jump around the arena, swipe his hands, and slam on the ground a couple times. I mean, we should get the gist of things by now. He does have one pretty crazy attack that zaps your entire health bar, and you have to deal damage to get it back. But after he casts the spell, he just kind of stands there doing nothing, so you can easily get free health back on him. Next at number 12, we have Amygdala. This boss is pretty much identical to our last entry, except this one's quite a bit bigger and has different magic attacks. With this guy being a lot bigger, it feels like you're fighting your camera more than anything. It feels like most of the time you go in for a swing, your camera is getting thrown around to look somewhere else. But if you're able to just stay close to this guy's body, then most of his attacks actually just seem to straight up miss, so you're able to hang out down there and fight a bunch. Next at number 11, we have the One Unborn. This is another huge mob boss that takes up half of your screen and has multiple lock-on points. I know I died 8 times, and that might seem like quite a lot, but my first couple runs, I had no idea you could go upstairs and kill the witches that healed him. So I was pretty much just wasting time until we figured that out. Once you actually kill the witches, this guy isn't hard at all. He has a few magic abilities that deal some pretty decent damage, but you can dodge those and just stay in the middle of his body and wail away pretty freely. Next up at number 10, we have the Cleric Beast. This is actually one of the very first bosses that you can even find in the game. The biggest problem for this is that it is a ginormous mob in a very small constricted arena. Other than that, the boss himself is pretty slow due to his size, and all he really does is sway his arms back and forth or slam them on the ground. He also has the ability to pick you up for some pretty substantial, unavoidable damage, but if you can dodge that, then this fight shouldn't be bad at all. Next up at number 9, we have Dark Beast Parl. I hate these big mob battles. I absolutely hate them. This arena is a bit more spaced out, so you have more room to maneuver and fight, but man, it can be rather challenging to actually land any sort of hits on this guy. With how big he is and where the 2 camera lock points are, it feels like I can never get a comfortable hit in. I'm just constantly missing swings. Besides just the big body, this guy is pretty much all melee besides a couple ranged and AoE lightning attacks. Next up at number 8, we have Blood-Starved Beast. This guy is kind of like the big dog enemies you find all over the map and on your way to this arena. This guy deals strictly melee damage and is also pretty fast. He stays on you for most of the fight. His attack patterns seem to be the exact same each time. He swipes at you a bit, does one lunging swing, followed by some more filling of the arms, and then it's the same thing over and over for the entire fight. The biggest problem for this whole thing is the fact that he does poison damage, which I didn't know for the first time around, so I didn't even have any antidotes on me. And then the next fight I ran out and had to farm for more. Other than the poison though, this fight really isn't anything special at all. Next up at number 7, we have Murgo's Wet Nurse. This is one of the final bosses of the game, and it's the only one that's required to complete a run. And with that being said, I really expected this to be a lot harder. I mean, I thought it would have a second phase or something, but no, it's a pretty quick one and done. This is a big mob boss, but Murgo actually has swords that she uses in various melee combos. The hardest part of this whole fight is the phase where she blacks everything out and sends clones to attack you, but they're extremely easy to avoid. And half the time she's not even actually aggroed on you, so you can just go in for some free damage. Overall, just a very underwhelming, very straightforward fight. Next up at number 6, we have Father Gascoigne. This is the first required boss of the game, and this fight felt a bit cheese at times, but overall it was actually pretty good. As soon as you walk in, you're immediately greeted with a shotgun blast to the face, so be on the lookout for that. Then throughout the fight, this guy is constantly attacking you with a mix of various melee combos and quick silver shots mixed in between. The first phase really isn't all that difficult at all to get the hang of, but what's actually pretty hard of this is the second attack phase. It isn't a whole extra health bar, but he turns into this giant werewolf type creature that's relentless with attacks. He would constantly get me locked in this stun animation that was perfectly synced up with my dodges, and I just couldn't seem to get away from him. Once we did finally get around that though, it was smooth sailing. Next up at our top number 5 hardest boss in Bloodborne, we have Ebrita's Daughter of the Cosmos. This is an optional fight you unlock after defeating the Celestial Emissary, and this is certainly a ginormous jump in difficulty from the Emissary fight. This is, you guessed it, another huge mob boss, and this thing has the same old moveset that all the others had. Swipes hands back and forth, slams the ground, occasionally uses a charge that always lands for some reason, can grab you for unavoidable huge damage, the occasional magic attack, you name it. This guy also has a super wide range on his swinging melees that almost feel impossible to dodge, but if you just hug his back the whole fight, then it's really not that bad. Next at our top number 4, we have Vicar Amelia. This is the second required boss of the game, and it honestly wasn't anything special at all. This is a giant beast fight where her main attacks are melee swings and slams, but she also has some range attacks that come from her slam abilities. This boss is also able to pick you up for some unavoidable big free damage, so watch out for that, but her main problem or difficulty comes from the second phase of this fight. Once the health bar gets down to about half, the boss is able to start healing herself mid-fight for a considerable amount of health each time. The first time I got into this phase, it really threw me off at first because I didn't know how to stop it, but if you just stay close to her, she can't pop the ability, or there's also the numbing mist that can negate the HP regen. There's a few other bosses that have some sort of heal ability too, but Vicar's felt like the biggest problem by far. Next at our top number 3, we have Gehrman, the First Hunter. This is the last of the 3 possible final boss fights of the game, and it's the only one where you're not fighting some big ugly creature that's not towering 10 feet above you. With Gehrman being the First Hunter, he's got the same kind of playstyle as the rest of the hunters you fight throughout the game. He's got a normal melee weapon for close range attacks and a special hunter blunderbuss for long range. This guy also by far felt like the fastest boss in Bloodborne. Half the time he's normal attacking, it damn near just looks like he's teleporting at you. There's almost no time at all to react. But also with him being like a hunter, that means that he's extremely vulnerable to being staggered and hit with visceral attacks. If it weren't for this, the fight might have been a lot harder, but in the first attack phase, it's pretty easy to just knock him down for some huge damage. Next at our top number 2 boss fight, we have Shadows of Yharnam. Right before I stumbled upon this fight arena, I was just explaining to somebody how the bosses in this game really weren't all that crazy at all. And then immediately after that, Bloodborne must have heard me talking and said, okay, here's 3 bosses at a time. Each of these 3 have a unique style of fighting, and they all have close or range attacks, and it feels like the attacks are just coming non-stop the entire time. If one person isn't attacking, then the other 2 are, filling up space. It can also be incredibly difficult trying to hit one person when your camera is locking onto a completely different other person, and that happens a lot with this fight. This fight and our last entry are really the only fights where it felt like I didn't have any sort of free space or chance to do anything. I was just constantly jumping around trying to dodge damage. And with that being said, speaking of our last entry, our top number 1 hardest boss in Bloodborne goes to Martyr Logarius. This was by far the most hectic fight in the game that was an actual person and not just a gigantic monster you can't even see half the time. This guy is absolutely relentless and constantly throws out varying different magic spells you have to dodge, while also using a few different melee attacks for when you get close. He also spams this sword spell that constantly deals damage unless you're behind cover, which restricts the area you're able to freely fight in. Speaking of area, you're actually fighting him on a gigantic rooftop that he can't even fall off of, but you definitely can, so that's another thing you have to watch out for. Another reason that this fight is a bit harder than the rest is because of how early on you find him. You're really not at all that powerful, so you're not really doing much damage, but he can still 1 to 3 shot you if you're not careful. And with that being said, folks, I think that's gonna about do it here for our list today. I just want to say sorry again for not including the dungeon or DLC bosses, but this year is just jam-packed with so many new games coming out that I just really don't have much time to spend on a decade-old Souls-like. And I'm also sorry for how late this video is coming out, okay? I wanted this to be out like a week ago, but like I said in the intro, this game was incredibly long and I just was not prepared for that. Wasn't expecting it at all. If you still made it all the way through here though, thank you for checking out the video. I really do appreciate your time. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. 2025 is going to have a bunch of new Souls-likes coming up, and I'll have boss rankings for all of those, so be on the lookout for that. We're also actually getting really close to the old 1,000 subscribers here on the channel. So if you're still here, man, come help a brother out and hit the old sub button. It is free 99. Alright, I don't know how to end the video. I'm just gonna go now, fellas. This has been Loner, and welcome to Bound.